To make a proper grid, you need to know what the proportions of your photo is. So for this assignment, I'm going to have you use a 4x6 photo, and I've given you a grid, but you could always draw a grid over top of it. Grids have to be perfect squares. You can see on this, each one of these is marked out at 1.75 inches because I'm using an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. In order for that to fit on this piece of paper, I can't go bigger than that. I can't go 2 because the paper is not big enough. And they have to remain squares. You cannot go from squares to rectangles. They have to stay squares. So notice on this piece of colored pencil paper, I'm using colored pencil. I don't draw my grid out in pencil. You want to use a very light color, and I'm marking this each one at 1.75 inches. And you definitely want to go back and check, and you want to do it on both sides and make sure that you're connecting them on both sides. That's really important. And if you started at the top, you go down, you start at the top on the other side as well, because you're going to have some leftover paper, because the dimensions of the paper and the dimensions of the picture are not exactly the same. So you cannot scale something onto something that is a different size, so you have to have extra. If you use rectangles, it's not going to work. So you can see I'm lightly sketching this out, and that's important. When I go back, I'll do a little bit harder, but it's important that you draw this really light because you eventually want to be covering this up. The great thing about colored pencil is that you build it up in layers, and if you use a light color like a orange or a yellow to draw out the grid lines, they're going to be covered up. So keep it light. And this is actually a little bit darker than I would even like to have it. There will be a tiny little bit extra over here on this side. So again, I'm starting up at the top over here, marking it, making sure I'm going from the same direction, because otherwise they're not going to measure up. And sometimes you'll just make a mistake, like maybe you accidentally draw one at 1.5 inches instead of 1.25 inches, or instead of 1 3/4 inches, or 1.75 inches, and if you do that, everything will be off. So it's important to just double check your math, make sure, because sometimes when you're in a hurry, you'll just be a little bit off. Now I'm connecting on these sides. I'm drawing this a little bit harder this time just so you can see it, but I would never draw this hard. I'd keep it pretty light. I want you to make sure that you are seeing these squares. I'm just going down to the very last line, so I'll have some extra space at the bottom where you can put your name and your term and your year. You can also use that space for like testing. Notice there's this extra bit of space here. There's an extra bit of space at the bottom, and that's important that you have that. And just put your name and term and year down here.